I really hit the cash register button on... It's supposed to be season 2. Jeez. Happy accidents. Okay, so here we go. We are recording now live. The intro. I gotta fade this intro music out or you will never hear me on today's show, episode 501 of Undertaking the Podcast's second season. Yeah, we had 500 episodes in the first one. That is ridiculous. And it is ridiculous as two Undertakers having a show about death, which turns out to be a show entirely about life. That's ridiculous. So we're going to embrace it. We're going to be a little nuts. And we're going to enjoy ourselves here on the second season of Undertaking the Podcast. So we've got a great show coming up for you today. Our guest today is someone introduced to me by the name of Joe. Didn't know Joe who was. I've never met Joe. And I said, yeah, you can come on the show. Let me figure out who you are. So I did. Met Joe. Joe was a character in a book by Caitlin Doughty. Joe hired Caitlin Doughty. Cool. It's a hell of a story, right? But everybody wants to know some things. Do we ask the questions? We're going to have to find out. That's how we plug a show, folks. You're going to have to listen to the show. This is the intro. So, got to tell you though, season 2 is going to have a new flavor, a new feel. We've had a rule in season 1. We don't talk about people when they're not here. Season 2, it's off the table. Or is it? I'm being silly. I'm being the great American man of folklore. Ryan told me that I am, so I guess I have to be. So, yeah, we're throwing some folklore at you. Is his name Joe? No, it's not Joe at all. It's Frank. Frank hired Caitlin. Frank didn't know he was in the book until 2 weeks before I interviewed him a couple months ago. And I've been sitting on this interview trying to think, what am I going to do with this? What is the angle? What is the story? And here it is. If you ask an Undertaker for help, oh boy, will they give you help. They'll give you everything they got. Probably too much if you ask them for help. All right? If you don't ask them for help, there's a ton of opportunities missed. So that's just not Frank, Joe, Caitlin. That's just anything Undertaking in general. And I've talked 2 minutes, so I'm putting the music back on. I'll turn it down now. So as I record the intro here to season 2, these may be long, folks, because I'm getting the news out in the intros. The news, the ads, and then the show. That is back to our programming here on Undertaking the Podcast. So as today, we talk to Frank, Joe, whoever. It doesn't matter, but he's got an amazing story. And do we talk about Caitlin and her books? Probably a little bit. It's been a while. I need to know about that. But what I know from this man is something completely cool. He's preparing for something, and he's getting ready for something. And it's kind of one of the most beautiful things in the world. So listen for that in the show. Now, one of the reasons why today's show and this morning is just so whopper-jawed, I got a video message from a place where children are getting killed, and seems like nobody cares. They talk more about the money than the kiddos that are dying. And let's just go ahead and throw the adults in there because they're just big kids. So there's a lot of kids getting killed and a lot of lonely people out there. And I had a really interesting video message from someone that's going to be contributing with Undertaking the Podcast here real soon. And they're going to teach us a lesson. And that lesson has given us in the show a direction that we're sniffing out. There's a lot of problems, and anyone can sort out problems. But if you don't come to the table with a solution, then you're just kicking at a foundation and looking for chaos. That's not what Undertaking the Podcast is. We've got a network behind us that you'll never find because we don't write it down. But it's there, and we're everywhere, and we're looking for problems to fix. So we're going international. So anyway, I'm plugging a bunch of things here, and we just need to get into the show. But last couple plugs here were brought to you by our good friends over ASD. ASD is the answering service for directors. I'm first. When I say I'm first, this is my first answering service. I'm in my first relationship, folks. It's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. They support me. I get to, look at me get to flex my ego about ASD. How cool is that? They catch the phone so I can live my life. How about that? Check them out over at myasd.com. And they paid for that. And I just made it up because it's real. So anyway, what else is real is what we're doing in Vegas. There is a very big to-do happen in Vegas, and we are not doing it. But we're going, and we're going to watch, and we're going to listen, and we're going to get together with the network, just so you know. That's what is happening, and we are so excited. There's a rim shot. So let's get into the show. We hope you're going to Vegas. We know you registered. Now it's time to make the plans to go because stuff is happening. There's the Eaton Train. The Eaton Train says wrap this. Let's get into 501. This is going to be 501 with Joe or Frank, who hired Caitlin. It's going to be awesome right here on the Undertaking the Podcast Network with the Eaton Train on Undertaking the Podcast.
She says, I know what you guys are like. I said, oh, what are we like? And she says, you're a bunch of ducks. And I said, how do you come up with that one? She says, on the surface, you're nice and smooth and you just cruise along. Nobody sees underwater how much you're paddling to keep that smooth going along on top.
My father's first generation, so the big joke with him was, well, I was dropped as a child, and that's how I found my way into funeral service.
She came in the day before the service to come see him. I took her in. She saw him. She instantly spun around and gave me the biggest, longest hug that I think I've ever had as a funeral director. And as she left, she says, I am so glad I listened to you.
But, I mean, it was absolutely a calling. But I was very much into the embalming, restorative art side. I knew the importance of seeing your loved one.
My name is Ben Whitworth from the United Kingdom with the Maswell Group, and you're listening to Undertaking the Podcast.
Just FYI.
You're what?
March, April.
You're what?
I've got kid duty as well.
Oh, yeah, I'm on the phones, but actually ASD's on the phones. How about that? Ooh, there's an ad. How about that? So we're recording. We're live. It is finally here. The big reveal. You've all been waiting for this, especially those who are fans. And I think it's fair to say fans of Caitlin Doty. When I don't know why it would be weird to say fans. She's an author. Authors have fans. I think it's kind of weird for funeral directors to have fans, but hey, it is what it is. Maybe it's not weird. I don't know, but
I don't think it's that weird.
Okay. Well, hey, it's Donate Life Month too. Is that what you're digging into over there? You look really
I actually am. I'm looking deep, man. I'm trying to look deep in some previous episodes here because the catalog is, like I said, extensive. But yeah, I'm going back into April of last year and looking at some of the stuff we've got for Donate Life Month. So this year is going to be, I'll tell you, strong work this year. All I can say is that.
Yeah.
There's a few interviews there where there's not a whole lot I really said, and a lot of that had to do with, to be honest with you, a lot of that had to do with the situation and the way the story was told, and it was deep, man. There was a few of them that were really deep. So,
Oh yeah.
Really good stories about people that have given the gift of life, friends. So hey, support that.
Absolutely.
As always, we here at Undertaking the Podcast are very supportive of organ donation and just donation in general. So
That's right.
we are here to highlight the month of April as National Donate Life Month, friends.
Oh, I'm like our listeners. I want to get into the show, but I got to go ahead and round out that
My
plug.
intros, you are such a
What? What's the matter with you?
face.
What do you want to argue
My
about?
intros, I tell you, I try to throw an intro in, and here we are. Go ahead.
You just did it.
Shut me down.
You just did it. Well, you want to do it again? I was getting into the show. Goodness. What a grumpy guy. Do your coworkers do this too? Just jump on you. You just walk through the room and they're like, "Hey!" Gee whiz. Anyway, I did mention Ryan's on kids duty. I'm on the phones, and they are covered by ASD. I'm telling you, I'm loving it. It's a new sense of freedom. So if you've never tried it, try it. Let me be the pusher of a call service. They will give you freedom. So you can learn more over at myasd.com. So our guest, we don't know who our guest is. We do, but we don't. We know him as Joe. Joe from the book, written by Caitlin Doty, Smoke Gets in Your Eye. You guys want to know who Joe is? We want to find out? Let's get Joe on the line. Standing by is Joe. Dun, 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 dun. Whoa, loud.
I can't even hear it.
Can you not? This could be bad.
Hello.
Hi, is this Joe?
It is. How you doing?
Joe, this is Brian, and I'm hoping to have Ryan connected to us here, but he is not hearing you. Let's see what I can do here.
Fair enough.
Joe, how is everything out in your neck of the woods today? You are out in California, correct?
That's true. It's another beautiful day in paradise out here.
That is awesome. I don't think... Ryan, can you hear me at all?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, my goodness. I almost had a stroke there. I didn't think you could hear me at all.
I can hear you. I can't hear him.
Oh, no. He can't hear you, Joe. Well, we're going to power through, I suppose. So it is what it is. But, Joe, our listeners are wanting to know, they know of you. You're a real human being, but you were written about by the name of Joe in a book called Smoke Gets in Your Eye by a former employee of yours by the name of Caitlin Doty.
Yep, that's all true.
Yeah. Well, before we get into Caitlin Doty, the book, your interaction with her, because I know the fans of Caitlin want to know, but as a funeral director, I want to know about you. You work in funeral service, and I want to know your story. So let's kind of start how you tell it.
Well, I go back to, I was born in Havana, Cuba in 1958, October of 58, and by January of 59, full-blown war was going on in Cuba for, the Castro Revolution. Some people may know a little bit about that or may have some, novel idea about it with Che Guevara and Fidel Castro and those guys. But it was a rough time. My dad was a patent lawyer actually in Cuba, and a pretty successful one. And he ended up after the revolution, he was begged to represent some of the political prisoners that were being summarily executed, basically by the new communist Cuban government, although it wasn't really announced as communist until a few years later. It was called socialist at the time. And instead of fleeing Cuba, like most of the other, well-to-do or wealthy or at least upper middle class Cubans did and head to Miami and start a new life, he decided to stay and started representing the people who were opposing the new government, the dissidents, as you would have it. And he was promptly jailed for that and put in a prison called Las Cabañas, which is literally translated, it's the caverns, and it's they're under an old Spanish fort on the Malecón in Havana. And he basically disappeared out of my life, and times became a whole lot rougher then. But he had a friend in Cincinnati, Ohio, ironically enough. His name was Joe Lichtenbaum, may he rest in peace. And he was the Attorney General of Ohio, and he was good friends with my dad, and he never gave up on him. And actually, Joe helped get my mom and me and my sister out of Cuba, and then subsequently he was able to secure the release of my father. And from there, we actually went originally to Cincinnati, Ohio, and then he went to Cincinnati, Ohio. He worked for Joe for a while, but he was never really the same afterwards. Really a guy who had somewhat given up on humanity, to be quite honest with you. Very smart, very righteous individual, but really broken in many ways from his, experience, which was pretty traumatic. And from Cincinnati, we moved to Florida, to Miami, actually, where I grew up. And, if you can imagine Florida in the 80s, if anybody's ever seen the movie Scarface, it's pretty much exactly like that.
Huh.
And an enormous amount of drug dealing, a lot of violence. And then with the Mariel boat lift, that injected a whole new aspect of crazy into the whole system there. So I decided to, I actually didn't decide. I was going to go into law enforcement in Florida, and I had actually applied, and it was accepted for Miami-Dade. And then I was invited by my sister to come out to San Francisco. She was at UCSF Medical School at the time. She's going through her medical doctor training degree at UCSF. And so I flew out, and, it was interesting. San Francisco was an interesting, very interesting, different place back in the 80s. A lot of fun and stuff like that. So I saw this newspaper ad, which I still have a copy of it, ironically enough, that said, join the force behind the star. Right. And SFPD was recruiting. So I put an application for SFPD. I ranked in the 1% for the entrance. Even though I'd done very poorly on my oral exam, I aced the written exam, so I was basically top of the list for hiring. I was hired. This was very early 80s, and I went to a police academy where I graduated number 1 out of the police academy, and wow. I trained at Central Station. I was immediately shipped out to the Bayview Hunters Point, which the moniker for that in SFPD's 3 Charlie, where it's like the roughest station out there. There was 11 sets of projects out just in that district, split up between sectors, but nonetheless very, very rough, violent area. So I cut my teeth there. I had multiple different assignments with SF police throughout the years, and I retired in the early 2000s from SF police because I thought I had enough of that work. While I was with SFPD, though, because I just had this entrepreneur spirit in me, I decided, you know what, I'm going to open a mortuary. There's a couple different reasons why that happened. One of them.
Uh-oh, Joe. Oh, no. Joe, hang on, pal. I lost you.
No. Okay. Go ahead. You there?
Yeah. I don't know what happened there.
No.
I got you loud and clear now.
Okay. Well, technical difficulties. Anyway, I was explaining, how I had I opened up a mortuary back in the early 80s, and it wasn't even a mortuary. It was frankly, a shoestring operation. But the reason for that, and I was simultaneously employed by SFPD, so I had, I was juggling both of those things and a lot of other stuff. I kind of tend to get bored easily, so I deviate off of one thing to another pretty frequently just to keep myself entertained,
sure.
If nothing else. But I also had that kind of entrepreneur spirit that I wanted to satisfy. It was a challenge. So, and I had, believe it or not, I spent a lot of time with some of these. They're kind of classic folks from the old medical examiner days in San Francisco. I remember Donnie Easterling was one individual, and there was just a bunch of guys. They were all characters. As you probably know, people in the funeral industry are kind of different breed of cat.
Oh yeah.
There are some real characters in this industry, frankly, and I appreciate that too. I kind of like the oddballs thing. So anyway, I got to looking around, and this is right when the AIDS crisis really took off, and so I opened up a storefront I had rented a building from the Port of San Francisco up on Second and Berry. And if anybody knows, if any of your listeners are familiar with San Francisco, they'll also recognize that as being like second base in the new Pac Bell Park that they built the new park there.
Okay.
But this is obviously previous to that. And I just hung a shingle. I studied for, funeral director's test. I applied for, the license for the facility. I went through all the hoops while I was still working SFPD. And as soon as I got into the business, and literally it couldn't have been any more shoestring. My morgue was a refrigerator I bought from the Flower Mart, right? And I took it apart and put it in the back of my truck and built it right on site. I had a little chapel in my facility that used to be a meeting hall for sailors. It was as rudimentary and maybe, I don't know, rinky dink as you could imagine.
How long did it take to get your first call?
I don't exactly remember, but it wasn't very long at all, because what happened was, so we're going right through the AIDS crisis, right? And unfortunately, people are dying ad nauseum, in volume. It really sad state of affairs, right? People are freaked out. It reminds me a lot of the current situation, or with 2020, right? The whole, people scared to death that am I going to get this? Am I going to die immediately? And all that stuff. And what I did was I went out and I kind of made some connections. Now as a cop, and if you're a good cop and you're doing kind of getting out and meeting people, because you're never going to be able to identify a criminal till you know what the good people are doing, and the good people are a great source of information to identify criminals or people who are causing issues at any particular time in any particular location. So I got out, and started talking to some connects I had, and I started getting cases right away. But my thing was so San Francisco was a very traditional place. Believe it or not, until very recently, San Francisco was quite conservative and had a lot of old school money.
Okay.
Generational money and money inherited over many different lifetimes. And the funeral homes were essentially either reluctant, if not straight out refusing to take AIDS patients. They didn't want to handle them, and I said, you know what, I'll do it. No problem.
Yeah.
You gotta take care of these folks. And on top of that, it's just a smart business approach.
Right. There's a market.
Well, yeah, there's a market. And to the extent that I really, thought that there was a position and a market for a place that wasn't the cathedral ceilings, the stained glass, the religious symbols everywhere, and all that stuff, right? So in other words, I was right there at the beginning of the storefront mortuary.
Sure.
where, no frills, very inexpensive. You just, get the job done. I saw, where the old time funeral directors in the city were, oh, that's just direct disposal. You'll never make any money. You're just going to work your tail off, and it'll never really reward you in any real sense because there's just no money in it. I disagreed, and turns out I was correct, actually. But anyway, I met some real characters during that era when I was a cop and a mortician. In SFPD, they used to call me Dr. Death, which was another kind of interesting thing, because when I was talking earlier about, being befriending the medical examiner's office and talking to guys who worked at the medical examiner's office and having closer relationships with them than other cops, ironically, when somebody dies in San Francisco and they're not under hospice care, or if it's unattended, unexpected, or whatever, they always have to send the cops out. The cops have to write a report, even if it's a very basic report. And I used to get those all the time. I mean, it was uncanny. I'd start my shift, and the very first call out of the gate was somebody, a solitary in a hotel room, right? Or Miss McGillicuddy, who didn't have hospice, was, sick and expected to die, but you still have to go out and take the report and report it to the medical examiner. So I got literally a boatload of cases. So I was already getting on-the-job training on the job, right? So I was getting mortician training on, while being a police officer. And that helped a lot, actually. It helped me get a grasp, so I wasn't just like trying to grab traction from nowhere, like from no schooling or anything like that, specifically related to the mortuary business, to, trying to run a business. But anyway, it did well. I wouldn't say, I wasn't like, I spent so much money, because what I did was I really invested a lot of my heart, effort, time, sweat to growing the business, and so that was a lot of reinvestment. So whatever money I was making, I was I tried to upgrade the van, the gurneys, the church pews for my little tiny hall that I had there for very small, what I call now ID viewings, right? But it panned out, and then I met some really interesting characters along the way that really gave me a lot of food for thought. I had, like for instance, Richard John Gordon. He is the founder, originator, and the concept behind Neptune Society.
Okay.
Period. And I met him one day, and we just got to talking. I was in my early 20s. He was in his probably 50s at that point, and he kind of took me under his wing. He was and he knew that I had a competing business. He actually, I got to give credit where credit is due. He, in fact, was the guy who probably was the very first of the people with that did the storefront thing, right?
Gotcha.
We're just going to have the bare bones basics here, and that's it. And so that was the concept behind Neptune, and it was also the concept behind my place. But I never really knew about Neptune until I was much deeper into the game.
Okay.
I started to looking around at the chessboard and figuring out, okay, well, where do I fit in the larger scheme of this? That's when I heard about Neptune. And then there was another guy by the name of Nick Daphne. And both these individuals are now deceased. Richard died about a year ago, and Nick died, 20 years ago. Nick Daphne had a place on number 1 Church Street in San Francisco, and many others. He had actually, and this was a traditional funeral home. This place was, 1970s motif, so it may have not appealed to some people, right? A lot of like shag carpet and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But Nick was a genius. But Nick was also despised by the other funeral directors because Nick was also kind of in that hybrid space where even though he owned a lot of high-end funeral homes, he actually he owned a couple of Asian specific funeral homes. One particular on Gary Street that his daughter Daphne just sold the building because there's more money in the building than there is in the business if you own a building in San Francisco. That's just the bottom line.
Right.
So I got to know Nick. I actually talked Nick into handling my cremations at his cemetery, which is Fernwood Cemetery. I don't know if that sounds familiar to you. It may or may not sound familiar to some people in the audience. But Fernwood Cemetery is in Mill Valley, a beautiful location up on the very top of one of the highest peaks in Mill Valley, and it overlooks like the ocean and the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. I mean, you have like a 360-degree view of some of the most the craziest views you'll ever see in your life. And he owned that, and within that location, he had a crematory that he used to cremate for his Daphne Funerals was the name of the place on Church Street, along with I think he had 4 other funeral homes in the city. And he agreed to cremate the bodies for me. So I was doing the pickup, the holding, getting the death certificate signed and filed, a much different procedure back then than it is today. You'd have to go and physically get an ink signature on a death certificate. Right now, there's a thing called EDRS. You get it all done.
And black ink, too. And black.
And black ink. Oh, yeah. I've had many. I used to bring 3 or 4. It's funny. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. I used to have to bring 3 or 4 copies, like typed copies of the same certificate in, because the doctors would screw up a bunch of them, right? Like first they sign it in blue, then they sign it outside the lines, and then they spill their coffee on it. I mean, it was, the medical profession has its challenges. Trust me. I don't know where you want to go with this. I'm trying to give you like a 360-degree overview, because I have so many stories that I could share with you that they're mostly just funny stuff but instructive for, I don't know what your audience is like either, but honestly it's got to be people who are at least peripherally interested in the funeral business, and or maybe getting into the funeral business, and I know that I've shepherded quite a few people through that also.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
I've had quite a few people who have worked for me have gone on to open up their own place.
Not all of them have gone on to write books though, right?
No, that's a rare bird. That's a very rare bird.
Absolutely.
But, after I was there, I was with Nick, and Nick was, again, he was hated both by like people like Jessica Mitford and Ernest Landauer and other like quote unquote consumer advocates, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But he was also hated by all the other funeral directors, who, by the way, all hated me because I was the new kid on the block. You're not supposed to do this. It's against etiquette. They did everything possible to try to keep me from getting licensed in San Francisco.
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to say, what were the roadblocks that were put in your way? Not just automatically there, they were put there.
Oh my God. I had everybody PO'd at me, from the College of Mortuary Science to not the guys at the medical examiner's office, not the guys doing the actual day in, day out, crawling under bridges to retrieve people who have passed away and are, advanced decomposition, skeletal remains, things like that. Not those guys. They love me. It was, Dr. Boyd Stevens, a guy named Herb Hawley, all the administrators, Joe Sertica, those guys just, I mean, they couldn't even see a picture of me without getting red, right? Because they were all plugged into that system where, it was a lot of hand washing going on through there between these people. A lot of, exchange of what I used to call professionally green donuts, right? In the police world.
Sure.
But in their case, it was actual donuts and dinners, and I'm sure there was money exchange and all this stuff. As a matter of fact, when I let me just say this: the College of Mortuary Science had this thing called the Indigent Debt Contract.
Okay.
And as I looked at the contract, right, and this contract is there's a request for proposal that's put out every 4 years, and there's supposed to be sealed bids and blah 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 blah. So I had looked, and again, the College of Mortuary Science was basically using these bodies as anatomical specimens without the permission of the family, which is, as you probably well know, illegal.
Right.
But nobody said anything about it because this is back in the 80s, and things were different, right?
Right.
But I knew that was an issue, but I also knew that there was a lot of shenanigans going on, right? And I wasn't looking. I had enough police work just in my own investigative career to fulfill my schedule, but my mind is just kind of works like this. If something attracts me, because right or wrong, or there's something odd about it, then I can't help but stick my nose in it. It's one of my biggest detriments, right? I have to go take a look, get involved, right or wrong, whatever it is. So I looked into the bidding process of the College of Mortuary Science, and they had, interestingly enough, every 4 years they increased their bid by exactly 2%. And which was, and they had the contract back then. I believe the first contract was 1938.
Oh, wow.
So it'd been a good long while. And so I say, you know what? Let me take a poke at this. See, there's some money involved here, right? It looked like the billing over a year's time would be somewhere in the $300,000 range, which is no small chunk of change.
No, it's not.
Don't get me wrong. Back then, I should say. Today, I guess it's pretty much peanuts. But so I went in. So I put in my bid, and I raised it by 1.5%. More than anything, just because that's my personality, right? If I'm gonna beat him, I'm gonna make it hurt. Hey, sure enough, I beat him by $2.
Oh, wow.
Right, I was $2 under their bid, and boy, did that kick off a shit storm. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss.
Oh, sure.
Or not. I try to restrain myself as much as possible, but I've grown up on the streets. I've been in all these different professions that are not exactly prim and proper, so. My personality's maybe a little rougher around the edges than you might expect your traditional funeral director to
Hey,
be.
you're going to fit in fine here.
Perfect. So I beat him by $2. So then and boy, they fought that, it was just a whole bunch of legal rigmarole. And, did he do this? What's high to you may not be low to me. So how do you know he was a low bidder? Those kind of sophistic arguments that, people make when they're just desperate to traverse something they don't like. And but they lost anyway. I took over the contract, and right away I noticed that the case count dropped tremendously. And I, again, curiosity and investigative curiosity. And so here's a good tip for your audience: don't ever piss off a professional investigator. It's a bad thing to do. And so I started looking. I said, well, wait a minute. This is not right. There's something missing here. I don't know what's going on, but I'm getting a whole lot less cases. And I had already studied the cases that were coming out. What kind of cases are they? You know, I knew just about everything there was to know about the indigent debt contract before I put the bid in.
Right.
Okay. And so I was down literally from like 350 cases a year or something like that to maybe 150.
Whoa.
Right. A substantial drop immediately. And so I started looking into it. I went and I did a public records request, FOIA Act, but it's not FOIA. It's kind of the different names, different states, Sunshine request, just to look at records to the health department. And I sat down and I went through all of the death certificates that have been filed within the last few years, really looking specifically at the College of Mortuary Science. And I noticed a couple things. Number one is that there were the case count was correct. Like if you just took hospitals or some convalescent calls, but just hospitals, right?
Yeah.
But and the balance that was missing in my case count was coming from the San Francisco Medical Examiner's Office. So that immediately triggered my kind of raised my interest. So I kept looking, and here's another terrible trait that I have, which is a really good memory, right? Yeah, I can't forget anything. I remember slights from when I was 5. So, and that is really an awful trait, by the way. Just being able to forget certain things to a point, right, is a really good thing for your well-being and your happiness. But anyway, I was sitting there in their offices at the health department, and I look and I see a name on there that I remembered on a death certificate. And the reason I remembered it is, and I have the list, the old list, right? The College of Mortuary Science list now with all the names on it, which I got from the health department because they were part of the contract, right? Health department, medical examiner. Medical examiner had the umbrella over it, but the health department was one of the players for the city in that. And I'm looking at the name, and I'm looking at the death certificate, and my mortuary's name is on the death certificate, yet it was on the billing for the College of Mortuary Science for the city, and it had come out of the San Francisco Medical Examiner's Office.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So, I immediately began my own, like, I guess you'd call it a private investigation. I don't know. It had nothing to do with my job, but whatever. I started, cross-checking these 3 things and started to find just a whole bunch. Like, in other words, all that missing swath of cases that were being billed, but were being handled by other mortuaries that, in fact, had come out of the medical examiner's office. So I contacted the DA's office and said, hey, you've got some criminality going on here. Somebody's paying somebody for, and then if nothing else, this college is billing for cases that they never did. Right. So the city's getting defrauded.
Yeah.
And I was promptly shut down. They wanted no part of any of that, because Dr. Boyd Stevens was a guy who they used to when I was in the academy, you have different coppers from different divisions that come in and teach different classes. Like you'll get some guy from the motor division, right? That motorcycle cop, he's teaching you about traffic. Sure. You get, an investigator, sex crimes investigator teaching you about sex crimes, narcotics cop teaching about narcotics, stuff like that, right? Dr. Stevens actually taught a class at the SFPD Academy, which I attended. And I remember when they introduced him, he was a really odd looking fellow, very tall, kind of like lurchy, kind of
Morgue looking. Morgue looking.
yeah. I mean, he definitely like fit the bill, right?
Yeah.
It was like a caricature, as you would have it, of a some guy who's doing what he does, which is handling deceased people, and the guy who introduced him said, "This is Dr. Boyd Stevens. We call him the Pope." And he said, "You may not know what I'm talking about right now, but if you ever shoot anybody, you will find out." And I thought to myself,
no.
that's interesting. So, so this guy basically cleans up bad shoots for the cop.
Oh no.
Yeah, no, that came. Unfortunately, that's
The things that are said out loud sometimes,
Well, and most people won't. I just don't care one way or another, right?
Right.
It's like whatever. It is what it is, right? It's the truth, and the truth prevails above anything else. So
Sure.
it doesn't matter. But that was, they called him the Pope, and it had to do with him, I guess cleaning up bad shoots.
Wow.
And other stuff. You don't just do that, right? It just doesn't work like that. When you engage in things that are inappropriate or immoral, unethical, illegal, whatever, any one of those categories, or all of them in conjunction with each other, crossing the line. Once you cross the line, it's easy enough to just keep crossing.
Sure.
Go into one thing or another.
I want to pause and just briefly went back to the harassment that you got. Was it in the form of inspections and all of that? And I want to ask kind of a segue from that. Was that harassment and the anger toward you based on that you threatened their business model with a different business model, or was it racially biased?
I can't say for sure. I mean, there was definitely some racial bias there. They would, like you can hear me talk, right? I speak perfect English. You would never know where the hell I'm from.
No.
But I also speak perfect Spanish, albeit like a Cuban, right? Very fast, roll the R's, do all that stuff, cut off words.
Right.
I mean, I'm born and raised in Cuba. I would get some of that mockery stuff, like, "Hey, Francisco," with the exaggerated,
I see.
Yeah. So, but I actually, if I had to weigh it, I would put 90% business threat.
That makes sense to me.
Right.
I knew a lot of it would be that anyway, because when you do maybe a lower priced option or a direct disposal option, everyone feels threatened, and you're the enemy just because you have a different idea.
That's true. And by the way, when you asked if I was targeted by the regulators, the answer is no.
Okay, good.
The state of California, the regulators that were on board, they really liked me because I was, again, stirring up the shit, and people like entertainment, right?
Oh,
and so the regulators actually were quite fond of me.
Okay. That's good. We've heard stories of old boys clubs where they call their buddies from the regulators, and you're getting inspected every 3 weeks or something type of thing.
I got that from the city and county of San Francisco.
Okay.
But not from the state.
Gotcha.
Because and those are two. If you understand the structure of these government agencies and the politics involved and the bureaucrats that are involved below the politicians and all of that, it would make probably clearer sense for you. But the bottom line is that the state had no beef with me, right? I was following all the regulations. I had my licenses. I had, my place was clean. It was orderly, albeit, low end. So I, and again, being a guy who's kind of law and order minded, I wanted to comply with all the regulations. So I would keep the politicians and the bureaucrats, from having anything to complain about.
Yeah.
Right. On the other hand, the city and county of San Francisco is a much different political animal, right? They will target you there if they don't like you.
Gotcha.
Right. And, some of the things that that would happen is that they were trying to, like tech me out, like what I call, technical, and not even technical, really, just kind of misinterpreted violations. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
So, but I call it teched out, but most of it came from the old players in the funeral business.
Yeah.
All the guys that were, third generation owners of this, palatial place, which, by the way, most of them are either dead or sold to SCI and then died, or, just out of the business, sold the buildings, like Daphne, who sold, she got, I don't know, millions of dollars for this building on Gary Street. She didn't want to sell to, any one of the corporates, apparently, from what she told me, because she was, it would have required her to lease back the building, and she just wanted to get out from under it when the getting was good.
So you're one of the original ones, few standing from the 80s, 90s now.
I am, actually. There are a few.
Couple outliers. Sure.
Yeah, a couple outliers. But, back in the 80s, there were probably 20 funeral homes in San Francisco. I think there are maybe 7 or so left, including us. So, but, what ended up happening with this College of Mortuary Science case, because I think it was mentioned, and I haven't read the book myself, so just FYI for that, qualifier here. So if I misstate something, just correct me, because I have nothing to base it on, except like recently someone who figured out that I was Joe, approached me and said, "Hey, are you Joe?" I said, "I don't know what you're talking about," but then he explained and said, "Yeah, that's me." And I didn't know about all the, the using monikers, or any of that stuff. So I recently acquired all that knowledge. But
so you didn't even know for how long?
Till about 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, you didn't know you were in a book?
No. Yeah, exactly.
My God. Oh, I didn't even know that. That's amazing. Well, so I got the phone call from the mutual friend, and he tiptoed around the story like I don't accept story ideas, and that's like most of the show, really. And I went, absolutely, I've read the book. And I had it in my office, so I started picking up, and he went to this one line, and I started reading from it. And I said, absolutely, it makes a great show and a great story. I want to know, just like everyone else wants to know. So, So let's kind of round out that story with the mortuary school.
Well, the bottom line was that they canceled when I reported what I in my professional opinion deemed to be criminality with at least the College of Mortuary Science, with possibly the involvement of the SFMEO. That really stirred things up, and what ended up happening was the medical examiner used some excuse to cancel the contract. They were going to bring it in-house and do it themselves, right? And I remember I went to a meeting because I said, hey, you know what? You can't just cancel this contract. This breach of contract. There's all kinds of issues here. I went to this meeting with this guy named Mark Mosley. He was a deputy city attorney, real arrogant guy, classic attorney, the cheap suit and the tasseled shoes, the whole enchilada. I mean, classic government lawyer. And I sat down with him. I said, listen, this contract was worth over, close to $1 million over its 4-year time frame, right? I'll settle this for $80,000, which is what I figured it had cost me, basically, in my time and effort and all this stuff to even get into the situation I've been in. And he said no and laughed at me. And he also said something I'll never forget, which is as I was walking out the door, he was like, "Oh, by the way, that the indigent dead, That would be a great name for a band.
Oh my God.
And that's how seriously he took this, right? Well, anyway, 10 years later, after multiple trips to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, this fiasco cost the city and county of San Francisco over $2 million.
Oh, geez. You had to go to court then.
That they had when they could have settled it for 80 grand. And I, in fact, am, as far as I know, I don't think anybody else has been able to or has done this. I'm the only person ever to get a jury award punitive damage against a San Francisco department head that stuck. Now, San Francisco ended up paying his punitive damages too, because I got a jury award out of this. You know, I went to like a 10-day federal jury trial in federal court at 458, and we prevailed.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, that our mutual friend mentioned this story, and I just wanted to put a few kind of extra pieces of the puzzle together for the folks.
I love it, and you've come action packed, and I know those fans of Caitlin of the books are waiting for the story, and I'm going to tease them one more time and not go there just yet because I've got to ask. This is podcast folklore. You knew Jessica Mitford.
I did. I actually cremated her.
Tell us your relationship with her. Tell us what she was like. I didn't
really just a really smart. Like, she was much older than me. Again, you have to kind of frame this I'm in my 20s and she's like in her 60s, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a multi-generational gap. Not only that, I come from communist Cuba and I'm just viciously anti-communist, right? Because I've had to eat that lifestyle for many, many years. They've harmed my family. The totalitarianism is just something I can't deal with. Meanwhile, she was reputed, and she admits this, to be was part of the Communist Party.
Right.
So we were on two very different sides of the spectrum, but we found a lot of common ground.
Yeah.
She hated Nick Daphne and Richard John Gordon, and I was friends with both of them, right? So I was kind of like the guy in the middle at that point, right? Where I was like, hey, these two guys aren't as bad as you think. And meanwhile, I'm telling them, just because she wrote a book saying that you can't sell expensive caskets or whatever, she ain't as bad as you think, right? But I had some really great conversations with her. I am wiser and smarter for having met her. She, explained to me the reasons for her having written The American Way of Death, that she felt that the funeral industry had gone from a noble profession to just a straight up grifting operation, right? And capitalizing on people's grief.
Gotcha.
None of which I'm on board with. Okay. Wasn't back then, still not on board today. But she was a very, very interesting character. They called her the Queen of the Muckrakers. There was a lot of ironies with her too, because she comes from semi-royalty family.
Yeah.
Right. This is a person with the proverbial silver spoon in her mouth, and she kind of took the side of the little guy, right, or of the consumers, you would have it in this particular case. But this is all like Berkeley 1970s, 80s type of stuff, right, where you had a guy named Ernest Landauer, or older, long bearded guy, looked like Santa Claus, great guy. He founded and operated a thing called the Bay Area Funeral Society, which is the very original one, right? There's a lot of them around now that are advocates, right? They're not actual funeral homes, but they'll recommend funeral homes. You sign up with them for whatever it is, $50, $100. Back then it was like $5.
Yeah. And
then they have a list of contractors that they will refer to you, and then you pick from that list and deal directly with them. But they've been, quote unquote, vetted. as straight operators.
Gotcha.
And that was Ernest Landauer's contribution. There's just a multitude of characters that I could go into that were on. It was a weird dichotomy of different angles, different mindsets, different intent or objectives, goals, things like that.
Sure.
But yeah, I ended up cremating her at my crematory. I did that cremation myself, and she had requested that I do so. She had asked me before she died to handle her death. She knew she was sick. She had lung cancer, I believe, if I remember right. And let's see, that was on 7/26/96, and I'm looking at my own records because I have records from the first day I opened our crematory,
Right.
which is across the bay. And let's see, 7/26/96 from 9:25 a.m. to 11:05 a.m. It was her cremation occurred.
So to clear up any funeral folklore, because for some reason Jessica Mitt forgets some. I mean, obviously with the book, but for even with her funeral, there's some air of mystery, probably mistakenly. But let's just clear it up. Was it just a direct cremation and that was all?
That's exactly right. No frills, direct cremation with sea scattering. I think the grand total was a little over $500, maybe $555 or something like that. I'd have to go back and look at those records.
The folklore was the bill, which was your bill now, was sent to Bob Waltrip at SCI as a joke, I guess?
That is true, actually. That part of it's true. That was done by a lady by the name of Karen Leonard. She actually did a spin-off of the Bay Area Funeral Society, but up in Northern California, and called it the Redwood Funeral Society.
Okay.
Those two operations are well gone now. I haven't heard from Karen in a long time, but she did take my bill and send it up to Bob to pay, and obviously he never did. It's like that.
Did the family have a celebration on their own or anything like that you know of?
No, not that I know of. It was quite the simple affair.
Okay.
We did the cremation and we did the sea scattering, and that was end of story. I mean, it's as budget oriented as possible.
Sure.
Yeah. It doesn't get any simpler than that. But yeah, you have mentioned in another conversation, the first conversation I had with you, that somebody said that she was buried in a cherry or mahogany casket or something. It's just complete sophistry. There's absolutely it sounds good, but it's not true.
Yeah.
She would never have gone with anything like that. She if she could have avoided the cremation container, which is a basic cardboard box, she would have done that, but it's required by law, so
right.
I have no choice. But
okay.
the minimum container in California is necessary.
Well, this makes a perfect segue then to just jump into Caitlin, and I'm going to read you just a quick, if I can get my phone here to light up here. I just pulled this from just kind of a book review website. So this is just kind of a brief overview of the character Caitlin, and then the character Joe in the book, and then we'll just kind of take off from there. So in the book, Smoke Gets in Your Eye. If you've not heard that, you can pick it up wherever you get your books, hopefully from an independent bookstore. But Caitlin Doty is the author and memoir of Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, and thus is both narrator and protagonist. Caitlin grows up in Hawaii, and at the age of 8 becomes fascinated with death when she sees a child fall to death at a mall. At the age of 23, she begins work as a crematory operator for West Wind Cremation and Burial in San Francisco. There, she hopes to learn the ways of the funeral industry. She initially had a vision of reducing people's trauma and fear of death by educating through a planned funeral home called La Belle Mort, the Beautiful Death. As Doty learns more about modern Western death practices and their way of distancing loved ones from death, she becomes more determined to promote more direct confrontations with the rituals of mortality. She moves to Los Angeles and attends mortuary school, intending to change intending to change the funeral industry from within, but she is brought physically and emotionally low by being required to participate in rituals and practices she doesn't support. After completing her education, she begins a web series called Ask a Mortician and writes essays under the name The Order of the Good Death. So even though it's a character that is true, I do believe. And then I want to jump to your character, Joe, your name in the book. And this is just what the website said. Rarely on site at West Wind, Joe is the founder and owner of the business. After a sunk boat ruined his plans to scatter families' ashes at sea, Joe started West Wind as a small business that quickly grew when he won the city of San Francisco's contract to dispose of unclaimed homeless and indigent dead. When harassment from bureaucratic cronies leads to the loss of the contract, Joe files and wins a lawsuit against the city coroner's office. At the time Doty works for him, Joe has kept the contract for nearly 20 years. There we go. Let's pick it up from there.
No, the contract I kept for about 20 weeks.
Gotcha.
But you know what? The part about, yes, I was not physically present a lot. I had Mike Tom was the manager over in the East Bay where the crematory was, where she worked. And then I had a manager over in San Francisco also. So, and I was, I never really, except for, a small stint, I never left law enforcement, right? So I had two parallel careers running on the same track. And so I had to attend to both of those.
Sure.
She is, and the boat sinking, no, that happened later. That's true. I had a boat sink.
Okay, so check that box. We did have a boat sink. Okay.
yeah. The boat did sink. That was a boat that I had actually built on myself on Islayas Creek, and the sinking had nothing to do with the construction, by the way. Just so let's put that aside for a minute. What happened was when I had launched it off of this. Again, I had a good relationship with the Port of San Francisco, so they kind of gave me room to do stuff that maybe somebody else wouldn't be allowed. But I was allowed to build that thing on the dock there, and then I launched it off the dock, and I took it straight to Alameda for a dry dock, so we could sandblast the bottom and do the painting and also get the U.S. Coast Guard inspection for carrying passengers. I was going to use it. I had another boat previous to that we did sea scatterings on, and that boat I sold. But the second boat that sunk, that's not folklore. It's true, it sunk, but it was the timing's a little off, right? And then I had that thing seriously insured, actually. So it was, let me put it to you this way. I didn't get any smoke in my eyes over that one. I mean, it was kind of sad because I had just spent a year building the thing, right?
Right.
On my free time. And then, all of a sudden it's like, what happened was the Marine Way, for any of you mariners out there, gave way. Marine Way is basically just a railroad track with a cart on it, and during high tide, you run the cart back, you put the boat on, divers go in, they block it up, they strap it up, and they pull it out, and then you can work on the boat while it's in dry dock. And the Marine Way actually broke, and they ended up paying, and that was the end of that story. And after that, I thought, you know what? I just started contracting out the sea scatterings because I figured. There isn't a whole lot of money involved in that, frankly. It's very kind of, you constantly have to have Coast Guard inspections, for obvious reasons. They don't want to put a bunch of people on a boat that's going to sink out in the ocean or even in the bay, because that could lead to very bad outcomes. So I just got out of it, and I had lots and lots of friends, mariners, and so I just hired it out, and to this day I still hire it out with an operation out on Fisherman's Wharf.
Okay,
a friend of mine for many moons.
Okay,
but yeah, that tells that story.
What are your memories of Caitlin?
You know what? Honestly, I mean, I just remember being a nice person. You know what I mean? I, for the most part, far and away, I've been pretty lucky with employees and stuff like that. You know, I had asked somebody else about her because I don't have a lot of specific memories. I knew, like, for instance, like, somebody told me, hey, there's a podcast, you know, somebody who worked for me said, there's a podcast from one of your old employees. And I, you know, or not a podcast, a YouTube
yeah.
channel or video or whatever. And I looked at it and I thought, she's pretty good, pretty creative. But I honestly didn't, it wasn't like, oh, you know, I would have, if you put 5 of people together, I wouldn't pick her out of a lineup.
Gotcha.
You know, to be honest with you, you know, it just, I don't know how long she worked there, you know, but one thing that, like, some of the employees were like, oh yeah, you know, she's just, I don't think she was meant to be a mortician. From what I've seen of her with her best-selling books and, or no, let me take that back. It's not that she wasn't meant to be a mortician. I don't think that's her first calling. Okay. And it's not my first calling either, you know, but I see her more as, you know, a individual with an enormous amount of creativity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And things outside the box. And those ideas, she's able to do something that very few people are able to do, which is to turn it into a living. Right. So I have nothing but like compliments for what she's done. I mean, without knowing a lot of the specifics, yeah, I knew about her book years ago, and I never bothered to buy it. That's why I didn't know anything about Joe or anything until 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Right.
So, okay. Like, for some reason, I don't know if it's my circles or just being in funeral service over, you know, the time frame that I grew up, being that it's when the book came out, but it's been a hot topic. You know, Caitlin's been, you know, kind of, knighted's not the proper word, but given the title of the next Jessica Mitford, which, you know, I just recently met Caitlin in Denver. There's a conference there, and we spoke briefly. She seemed very nice, and outside of that interaction, I don't have any opinions because I've never met her before, and she just seemed really nice. And
again, it's hard for me to opine because, again, my memory of her is so vague. I remember I was able to put 2 and 2 together when I was told that she had this podcast and blah blah blah, or not podcast again. I keep using the wrong term. This video show.
Yeah.
And I and that she had written a book. I frankly didn't even know the title of the book until our mutual friend brought that to my attention by sending me, you know, just like a snapshot of the cover.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
I mean, I was completely ignorant of anything to do with the book or my role in the book or my company in the book. Now, why she used pseudonyms, I have no idea. Yeah, I wouldn't have complained. I mean, I would have given her full authority to use the true name of the business and my name, and she in fact did use, according to what was read to me over the phone by our mutual friend, she did use some names that were correct. You know, like Mike.
Yeah, there's a Mike I saw and a Chris
and then there's a Bruce, the embalmer.
Yep.
So, you know, these people, that's legit. Actually, as a matter of fact, you know, I just talked to Mike yesterday, and and Bruce still works there. So, you know.
So I'm assuming that the other people were in the book, whether they knew it or not. It's not impacted them in any way that's come across your path.
Not at all.
Okay.
Again, I was asked by our mutual friend Mike. Let's just call him
Mike. Yeah, Mike's awesome.
That's the thing. He is awesome. You know, I can say. Well, he actually quizzed me. He goes, well, you know, you have any idea? Because he told me, and I didn't know this, that there's this like thing that everybody wants to know. First of all, everybody thinks that name is correct for the operation, which it's not, obviously. And then I don't know. Everybody wants to know who Joe is, and it's no. I mean, again, I have no reason to keep any of that secret. And I'm not blowing her cover, and she has like some grand plan to do a Joe reveal or something down the line, or a second book, like a follow up, and I just bombed her ambitions for that. But if I did, my apologies. I just couldn't. I didn't see the benefit to it, frankly. Why not? If you're telling a real story, you might as well use the real names of the characters, unless one of them complains. But I didn't know about it. I was never asked. I never really opined on any of it. Now, you mentioned something about the next Jessica Mitford, and I can tell you this: there will never be another Jessica Mitford, because those days are over. There's no need for another Jessica Mitford. Mitford broke the back of the the traditional funeral industry. She broke their back, and that's easily provable by the rate of cremation, not just in California but everywhere. Just overtaking traditional funerals, traditional burials. There are other factors that impact this, like that people are more transient, that religion has kind of been tapered down a fair bit. A lot of the funeral services had to do with Catholicism or somebody who's Orthodox Jew or something like that. And there's less and less of that crowd. But I think if I had to say what was the biggest impact, I would say it was Mitford, frankly. I think that she really pissed off a lot of traditional funeral directors. She really did.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that said, I think that she is on the cusp of something different, where she has the ability to be either a spokesperson or an advocate or some person with high authority within this next wave of to the funeral industry, and that is the alkaline hydrolysis, and also potentially the decomposition type deal that is now, I think it's been approved by the state of California for the burying the compost burial.
Oh yeah, coming your way.
And then there's the alkaline hydrolysis, aka water cremation or aqua cremation and all that stuff. There's an operation. It's run by David down in Escondido. It's called White Rose. I have my own little YouTube channel, although I don't know that I have 50 subscribers or something.
Go ahead and plug it though if you want.
No, I will at the end if you want me to. I mean, I don't really care, because frankly, it's not really meant to tell stories.
But it is helpful for mortuary students, though, that want to go deeper into a process, because you sent me over a couple videos, and I was like, wow, this is really thorough. Yeah.
Well, what I do in my YouTube channel, and I'll plug this one, Rumble, because I'm going to start moving everything over to Rumble.
I don't blame you.
But what I do is, like, for instance, I videotape repairing the retort floor, right?
Yeah.
I have, I think the most views I've gotten on anything was when I show how to operate the retort, right? Just a basic, like, here are the controls, here's what it does, here's a little bit of combustion technology, these are the things, for the operator, right? But I get much deeper into that, because one of the things that I know for a fact is that the repair and maintenance of a retort is one of the most expensive things that somebody who has a crematory, particularly somebody who's starting up,
right,
is going to face. And this stuff is not rocket science. I consider myself, if you were to ask me, what are you, right, professionally?
Sure.
And I've done a lot of stuff, trust me on this, but I would say one word: I'm a mechanic. I fix things. That's what I love to do. That's what makes me happy. That's where I'm in my, in my zone. I love to build things. I love to tinker on things. I love to rebuild things, to improve on them. All those things just, are, make my heart sing. The other stuff is just to stay alive and eat, right? Because, if I was working even as a higher end mechanic, it's just, unfortunately, and I think this is changing too, but the trades and people who actually carry their knowledge at the end of their fingers that are mechanical and able to work on things are going to become more and more valuable in the very near future. And the guys that are running the abacuses and wear the suits and have the lattes, no offense, but are going to be pushed aside for people who are much more practical in their pursuits, right? The welder, the
plumber,
the construction guy, the roofer, the guy who fixes your puts new brakes on your car or rebuilds your engine, or the guy who's rebuilding hot rods, which by the way I love to do. I'm a real old car fanatic, right? And I have in my main residence I have a large shop, and I have a bunch of old cars. I mean, it kind of looks like Sanford and Son's old scene there. But you know what? There isn't a vehicle that I've ever bought that isn't worth more today, even if I didn't touch it, than it was when I bought it. Nice. Right? And I'm slow to say that that's true of anything else I own. Right? So I'm fond of that. But I think that, getting back to Caitlin, I think that, she was, I remember I went back a little bit because I got interested myself in this hydrolysis process. And here's the reason why. I fully believe that this country is going to go electric at some point. And I think all the indicators and writings are on the wall.
Sure.
You have the electric cars, albeit not perfected, but like any technology, it gets more and more traction as it gets more and more reliable and better. You have a lot of things that used to be gas fired or propane, natural gas or propane. They're going to electric fired. And you have the shortages of fuel. Based on cutting off pipelines and things like that. A lot of that goes into politics, and I try to stay away from that as much as I can because it messes with my head.
It's no good there. Don't go there. Yeah.
Yeah. And but as I see it, like for instance, I saw a proposal coming out of the state of California wanting any smokestack industry to figure out a way to recapture the carbon emissions from the smokestack, right? And there are things called scrubbers. If they ever like put those in place, it would put everybody except SCI, every crematory except SCI, and a few others, foundation partners and things like that, straight out of business. It's just prohibitively expensive. But there was other even crazier ideas like capturing the carbon and containing it and taking it out to some other state, which is kind of ironic. Okay, so now you're going to go pollute somebody else's state, but and burying it in lime fields. How that works, I have no idea, but I know that I've read it in a legit periodical. So it's out there.
Yeah.
And the legislature in California, who has done some pretty crazy shit, in my opinion, here and there, like any other government agency. They're people that, a lot of them just, when you have unlimited power, unlimited money, and you're spending somebody else's money, it's a lot easier to come up with harebrained ideas. When you have to actually pay the payroll and insurance and property taxes and maintenance and fuel and all that, you start to get a different perspective on things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to be able to know to budget those and et cetera. But I did get into the aquamation, which by the way, and I don't know how much time you have, but I have ideas that I don't understand for the life of me why they associate the alkaline hydrolysis with cremation and not burial.
I feel like it came from the manufacturers I feel like it was an easier sell to change, to just add it to existing cremation law that was more digestible for legislature. Because, when you ask a government, if they ask them to do some work and change some language, they're going to pout. But if you can get them to just, make it fall under a definition, that's a lot easier. So I think they kind of just took the route less traveled. Because here's the thing is most funeral directors are sitting out here in rural America going, that's not fire, folks, that's water. But the argument from their side is, well, the end result is similar. And that's the argument that I hear.
In my opinion, is not even really true. I could tell you, just going back to Cuba for a minute. In Cuba, because it's an island and because space is limited, when somebody dies, what they do is they rent them a burial space. Okay. That burial space is rented for anywhere between a year to 18 months. And realize in Cuba, they generally don't embalm. The decomposition process happens quicker that way. Yeah. And then after that time period has elapsed, they dig up the grave and pull the bones out. And then the bones are left intact. So in other words, if you've seen any results of, the process itself, you would see that it's a skeletal remains that are left, right? It's pretty much intact, which is not true of cremation. That's not the case. Trust me, I've done 29,000 plus cremations.
I see where you go. Gotcha. Because at the end of aquamation, you have an intact skeleton.
Correct. And essentially what you have done is you have accelerated the decomposition process by use of hot water and chemicals, right? You're using potassium and steam, essentially, to accelerate what would happen normally in a grave.
And now you have a bioresponse system, correct?
I do not yet. So if you look, again, on my last few videos that I did for my YouTube channel it's called what did I title it?
The Mortuary channel.
Alkaline no, it's called, the videos themselves, it's a 4-part series. Alkaline hydrolysis, making the right choice.
Gotcha.
And what I did was I started by going up to Seattle and visiting a place which is essentially a removal service, but one of the busiest removal services I've ever seen. And
we've been to the same place.
Yeah. Steve over there gave me open doors, and I want to thank him for that. And Dave actually went up with me. David from White Rose, both great guys, just like salt of the earth types, really fine individuals. And I saw the resumation machine up there, and frankly, and I had some reservations about the resumation machine because it was an enormous footprint. So, it would fit within my facility, but I have an inordinately large facility.
Sure.
It's not your average, mortuary with a crematory in the back, right? Where it's like most mortuaries that have crematories, it generally was a second thought. They were put in a space that they could fit the thing in, right?
Sure.
But the resumation between the machine itself and the tanks and the steam generator, I mean, it was literally in 3 separate rooms, and all of these things were huge. And I thought to myself, you know what? And it also seemed to me that it was overly complicated. So it violated the first rule of engineering, which is keep it simple, stupid, right? And I left with an open mind.
Sure.
Because David actually, who has a machine by BioResponse, that's the owner, proprietor, another great guy, Joe Wilson. He and I've had a lot of conversations with him, very candid conversations, because realize, when you're talking to a tinkerer, nothing's perfect.
Sure.
Right. You could put the best blender on the planet in front of me, and I could figure out a way to blend that banana a little faster. Right. And that's just how my mind works. It's I can't help myself. It's almost a neurosis. But I left Seattle, came back, did that video on the Mortuary channel, and then went to San Diego and did 2 videos down there on the aquamation machine. And by the way, aquamation is in fact a trademark for Joe Wilson, who is, the proprietor of BioResponse Solutions. And I went down there, walked through the whole system with Joe on the phone and David there, kind of, and Phil, who is the other proprietor of the White Rose down in Escondido. And again, I can't emphasize enough how impressed I am with their operation, what decent guys these guys are. And anybody down there that was looking for this, I would have any issues at all in for myself, speaking personally,
sure,
in engaging them. They're absolutely wonderful folks, and their place is clean, it's new, it's spotless, it's very advanced. They take great care. Everything I saw, it checked off all of the boxes for an operation that is well run and will succeed, in my opinion.
Nice.
But then I came back. So I did a video on that, which is also available. That's currently published. And then I did a third video on a process. We actually did an aquamation while I was there, and it was just amazing, right? And it really kind of opened my mind up to all these different thoughts. I mean, it's almost kept me from just thinking about anything else, really. It's so intriguing to me, the whole deal. But so I published that video. But one of the things that we accomplished while I was there was where, Resumation says that they can do the process in 4 hours, and that's probably true just because of they use hot live steam as opposed to using submersible electric heat generators inside the machine. There's just a lot of stuff that
right.
Technical stuff that if you want to watch the video and you'll see what I'm talking about. But the process that we did there, which is the third video, actually took about 5 hours.
Okay.
And the BioResponse, and they sell 2 different types of unit. One of them's a non-pressurized cold vessel, or not cold, but warm.
Right.
And the other one is a pressurized, the one that David has down in Escondido. It's a pressurized hot vessel. So the water's running at 303 degrees.
Okay.
And that particular unit, the whole time David's been running it, and also by the full admission of the manufacturer, should take about 8 hours.
Okay.
To do the whole process. Now I was like, hey, let's just play around with this thing and see. So, it's got an automatic mode on it, and generally you just press a button, come back 8 hours later, and it's done, and next one comes in. But for a production operation, that just doesn't work.
Right.
It just doesn't work. You would need, to handle the caseload I have currently, I'd need 6 machines if I didn't have my retorts, right? Because I can cremate a body. The average body for me, I could, from the minute that the remains are inserted to when everything's done, is about an hour and a half, and some, could be an hour and 45 minutes if they're a little bigger, or it could be longer if they're really big, because this is combustion technology is how much you can burn, how many pounds you can burn per hour. That's how it's measured, period. So this is much different. But in setting the thing manually and bypassing a few of the steps, which I felt were, maybe extra, right? Like it just, excess of caution, as you would have it.
Sure.
We completed the process in 5 hours. And then, when there's, all these different characters and actors that I've met throughout this process. And I want to, give my son a lot of credit. He's basically running the mortuary now, Pacific Interment Service. He's the new president of Pacific Interment Service. He's a real smart guy, young guy, very talented and ambitious. And when I was about a year ago, I was getting ready to put in 2 more machines because I had a license for 4, but we only have 2.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, well, how about we look at something a little bit different? And frankly, I'm a dinosaur, right? I'm an old guy, born in 58. I'm 65 or almost 65 years old. And I'm not his crowd. Right, that grew up with an Apple phone and Google and computers and games and all that stuff. So, and I said, well, let me take a look and actually I understand the green side of it. I really do, and I'm not, and I don't beef it at all. I mean, I'm not I'm kind of at this point in my life an environmental agnostic. Right.
Sure.
There's so much BS on both sides that I can't figure it out.
That's true.
And it's really, and then, the alarmist side of it. I'm not an alarmist. I want to, try to take things like just rationally. And, the whole like Al Gore will all be underwater by 2015 or something like that. I forget what he predicted.
Oh, yeah.
But those things tend to undermine your argument. Right, you're making predictions of doomsday prediction, 20 years into the future. When it doesn't happen, you got egg on your face. Why somebody would do that, I don't know. But that's, again, going off into politics. And I try to shy away from it because it's very distressing to me.
Sure.
But, back to Caitlin's role in all of this, I think that she is actually a terrific spokesman for alternatives. Sure. Not so much so Jessica Mitford was a terrific advocate for the consumer from a don't get ripped off perspective. Here are the facts. This is what they're doing. This is the sales pitch you're going to hear. They're going to take you in the casket room. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They're going to try to upgrade you and say, wouldn't grandma look just great in that pink casket over there? And it's only like $500 more than that box over there. And what I mean? She exposed all of that. And that's all fraud. It's all outrageous conduct, and she did a great job of doing so, and I applaud her for that to this day, right?
Sure.
Setting aside any differences we may have had concerning, again, politics and communism versus, whatever else is out there, because, it's complicated. But I think that she's, from what I've seen of her videos lately, I think she's a great advocate. She is, and she's a great storyteller. And people that have that gift are few and far between. Right.
My read on Caitlin is she really means well. She has a good heart, I do believe. She will do battle with funeral directors that aren't that refuse to challenge themselves. How about that? That's a fair way to say it, because just as you met resistance with funeral directors when you came in with your idea, when Caitlin comes in with ideas, she met resistance too. And then so she's had a battle back and forth, and that's why some have claimed her to be the new Jessica Mitford. I don't think that's her purpose. That's her plan at all, in my opinion. But that's neither here nor there. I got to ask the one question though. This is the one thing in the book that just irked funeral directors, and I probably know the answer in my head, but I got to ask it. But it's about how we go about cremated children, and I don't own a crematory, but I assume it's very similar to cremating an adult. But a small child you place in the crematory, and you've got to get it in a certain position, but she wrote about in the book about how you toss child, not you specifically, but how the crematory would toss children. And I'm just going, I don't foresee that as, I felt that to be not factual, but
it's not. It's not. So here's the deal. Children, especially infants, but any child, first of all, it's the most horrifying thing a person can ever do. Okay. To have to go just to pick them up, to handle them, to deal with the grief, the unimaginable grief that parents have is for me, it's the toughest thing that I do. And I've been through it all. I am battle hardened, and that's one that I actually shy away from.
Yeah.
I don't like it because I feel, messed up for a long time, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. It just really ill affects me. Now, setting all that aside, first of all, the recovery of the cremated remains, if you understand the turbulence inside that machine when it's running, you would, begin to understand how tiny little bones can get blown around everywhere. No matter how well you sweep, there are crevices. The machine made out of, the interior lining is all refractory, the walls are brick, the floor is poured, but nonetheless, it says it right on the authority to cremate, there will be some incidental, quote unquote, commingling. Now, incidental applies to adults. When it comes to an infant or a young child, from, I'd say, 10 down, you're going to get a lot more commingling, because even just as you sweep, you're pulling some of the floor away, right? It's a wear item.
Oh, yeah.
And that's going to get mixed in with the cremains. The turbulence, there is, high pressure air being blown in there through a thing called the hearth air. You have the throat air in the back, and then you have, like in my machine, the rear burner is 2 million BTUs, the front burner is 1.5 million BTUs. When it's in full fire, you have 4.5 million BTUs burning, and the body.
But you don't have to get a baby to the back burner, do you?
No. And as a matter of fact, they're loaded right, pretty much a foot or two from the front.
So there's no reason to toss at all. Could that just be
there wouldn't. And I guess, so the main burner that you want the child under, because believe it or not, a child could take just as long as an adult, because the formation of the child is a lot gummier. It's a lot more, and it just doesn't burn well. Honestly, there's not enough BTUs to assist in the cremation, so it takes a long time to complete a cremation.
Where my mind just went, though. Maybe this entire time that she's saying that she wasn't actually tossing them, that was just the way she typed it, or the words she chose, that she actually wasn't physically tossing a child.
I seriously doubt it. I could tell you the from the edge of the door to where the burner is, where you would want to situate the child. And by the way, you can always readjust. We have tools, and we have to adjust bodies frequently to bring them back under the cremation burner, or else it would take, hours and hours and hours to complete the cremation. So that is just a process of, like a mechanical process that is necessary to complete.
Just for efficiency.
Job.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But, if the child wasn't properly positioned when you put them in, right, then you could use what I call the rake.
Sure. And
take the rake and gently place the child directly under the cremation burner.
Gotcha.
And so and I think either you or Mike mentioned this to me before, and I thought about that actually for a while, because that's, to me, one of the most important things when somebody is passed away is just maintaining their dignity, right? Just keep them covered, keep them refrigerated, treat them, as a human being that had a life, that had experiences, that has family. It could be your mother, it could be your sister, it could be your kid, by the grace of God. It's not, but, treat them like that. So that didn't sound right to me.
Yeah.
The one thing I could think of is that she may have opened the door after, so here's the progress of the machine. You start up in the morning, machine's perfectly cold. Now, we have a thing called an auto loader that automatically loads regular cremation containers, i.e. a full body, into the machine for you. Okay. But for loading a child, you would manually load, because the auto loader will not we'll put the child way back in the machine, and that's not going to be good. You're going to have to pull them up a fair ways to get them under the flame. So she may have opened the door, and I'm just speculating here. This could be 100% incorrect, right? This is just me trying to place all the pieces from that story together. But my thought is that maybe she opened the door, and there have been 3 or 4 cremations in advance of this one, and that thing is blazing hot when you do that. Now, that would be, in my opinion, an operator error. I wasn't there. I never saw anything like that, and I really have never seen anything like that in front of me ever.
Right.
But if you open the door and you start feeling that heat that'll burn your hair off or singe your eyebrows, or then you may need to move quickly and just I don't want to use the word toss, but just put the baby or the infant or the child in by hand, and then close the door as quick as you can. Because honestly, if it wasn't for our autoloader, we could not run production. Because before the autoloader, when I had to load by hand when I first started, my God, I mean, I would feel like my clothes were going to explode. And since the autoloader that allows us to load hot, right, I've had it where I've opened the door and the foot of the box explodes in flames, even just sitting on the autoloader before the thing even begins to move into the retort. That's how hot the heat can come from the inside of the machine.
Ooh, yeah. Wow. Well, I've got one Mitford question that popped in my head. What do you think she would think of just everyday funeral directors out here in the middle of nowhere, rural America?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I know, in talking to her, she emphasized the nobility of the profession until like the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and then it just kept deteriorating from a ethics standpoint. She was also really, really hostile to the corporates, like really hostile to the corporates. She hated SCI. That was her arch menace. That's why the Bob Waldrop story and all that stuff.
Gotcha.
That's where all that's coming from. This is the way I see it. Okay, it's just like everything else. But it started much, 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 much before any of these following examples. Are there really any hardware stores left? No, you got Lowe's and Home Depot. You might have a corner hardware store here and there, an Ace or something like that, but it's a rarer and rarer bird, right?
Yep.
Are there really any pharmacies left?
Ooh.
No, there's CVS and Rite Aids and Walgreens and a few others, but the corner pharmacy, which was in the 50s and 40s, 30s, a staple of America, they're all gone, right? It's all corporations. Well, SCI and Stewart, Frank Stewart and Bob Walker, okay, they were the first 2 major consolidators.
Right.
And they call themselves consolidators, even though I guess, from a broader perspective of looking at looking at what they're doing, I guess they are consolidating, but I see it much differently. And then the other players came in, Carriage, you have Foundation now. I mean, there's quite a few, right?
Yeah.
Are these funeral directors? Not in my opinion, right? They are, more of the abacus guys, right? They're running. First of all, they're generally public corporations. Like I don't know if you know this, but SCI also holds shopping centers and food stores and all kinds of different investments. I mean, rental properties and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
They're a very diverse operation, but they are also, if not the largest, one of the largest holders of funeral homes and cemeteries, crematories. In other words, in the overall interment business, they are it as far as volume, caseload, and money both. they're top dog. And one of the smart things that they did was that they didn't rebrand. They would buy Jones's Mortuary out in, Midwest somewhere, and it would still have the sign that it had from, 1920 there in the front, Jones's Mortuary, right? They didn't take and they pulled out Jones's Mortuary and put SCI. Right. Now, is there an element of deceit in that? You could make the argument. She certainly did, right? The people are unaware that they're dealing with this monster corporation that may or may not have their shit together well enough to take proper care of their loved ones. This is her opinion. I heard it from her directly. I honestly think that from my perspective, I love them, right? Because I'll compete with anyone, right? I will. And I'm an old man and I'm tired and I'll still outrun them. And then I got a kid that's taken over who's like nice and young with brand new bones and muscles and brain and all that stuff, but lots of energy, and I'm unleashing him on him, right? So
I love that.
I don't see them as competition, nor do I see the last Mohicans of the independents as competition. Those individuals I see as as a shield. We have to unite. It's our job to inform the public. Here are your choices. And you can deal with me, or you could deal with somebody who has been cycled through, and might be the 15th guy there this year running that front office, right? And it's a strength and a weakness of the corporations, right? Because the corporations, if they need more manpower, if they get super busy, which we have been since the pandemic, just off the hook busy.
Yeah.
Okay. But and not for I don't even. Am I allowed to mention the?
Oh yeah, you can say the C word.
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't even know, right? Everybody's like, I don't want to mess you up or get
no, you're fine. You're fine.
In trouble or anything like that, man. But yeah, let's just call it the sniffles. It's since then it's been crazy. But one thing that the corporates have is just like a bullpen that's just infinitely deep. If somebody walks off the job, and unfortunately, a professional mortician is kind of a dying breed. Yeah. For the most part, it's hard to find even somebody who would take this over a job at Jack in the Box.
Yeah.
Much less somebody who's licensed and has 10 years of experience or something, and really is a quote unquote professional mortician. But you could throw a suit on anybody and hand them a gurney in a van and tell them to go pick up a body. You can throw a suit on anybody and put them in a front office, and once they learn the pricing scheme, it's pretty repetitive per se. There are nuances and you have to learn those, but again, that doesn't mean that you're going to have a long-term employee. That's one of the most difficult things that we're struggling with right now, is finding people who actually want to do the job, do a good job, keep the reputation solid, and deal with a very difficult job. You're a professional mortician. None of this that I'm about to say will come as a surprise to you, but this is a grueling job on so many different levels. First of all, you got the 2 a.m. house call, right? Or you got the 2 a.m. shopper, right? That is going to ask you 50 questions when you've just been woken up out of a deep sleep, right? So you got to deal with that. That's just how it is. If you want to stay in business, you have to answer those questions, and you have to be professional, and you have to be able to communicate even when you're half asleep. Then you got the emotional side of it, right? So where you're constantly dealing with grief. That's not easy. It's not easy no matter how hardened you are. It's not easy. I mean, if you're a sociopath, maybe it's just fine. But anybody who doesn't have the sociopathic tendencies is going to have some difficulty with the grief part of it. It's just inevitable. You know what I mean? There are certain cases that I see that are really troubling, right? Or families that you particularly empathize with, or you feel their loss, right? That's difficult. Then you have the fact, and I tell every employee when they start, be them professional or not professional, do not take anything that anybody says to you over the phone personally. You have to realize that these individuals that are calling in here are calling during one of the most difficult times of their life. And they have just lost somebody, and it could be a spouse, it could be a child, it could be a mother or father that they're very attached to, whatever. And you have to realize that if they lash out at you, if they're, just try to listen, don't, engage in any type of, hostilities or anything like that. You don't have to sit there and take hours of abuse or anything. But generally what I found is when I talk to people clearly and explain what we're doing and reassure them that we are professionals and that the job's going to get done. It's going to get done right. You're going to pay a fair price for what we're doing, right? And when it's all over, at least the logistical side of this death is not going to cause you any more trauma than you have had from the death itself.
Yeah.
So you have that to deal with. And then, some of the other struggles are like if you're actually, not in the front office and working the back. The increase in weight that we've seen in the last. To me, it's astonishing, right? I personally weigh the same as I weighed in high school, but I have had probably 40,000 death certificates to look at, and they have a lot of things in common, and they tell a story. And if you actually look at these things like I do, and I'm somewhat neurotic about it, I look at them all. But if you do that, you will learn that number one is you're seeing just a huge increase in the population with what not me, but this is somewhat of a new term, but it's called metabolic disease or metabolic syndrome.
Sure.
Right. And that's a conglomeration of a lot of different diseases. You're talking diabetes, you're talking high blood pressure, you're talking, arterial disease, you're talking strokes, and they all stem, in my opinion, and no medical advice here too. I'm kind of learning the YouTube ropes here.
Right.
This is no medical advice. This is just some lowly mortician giving his personal opinion. But number one is processed foods. I will not eat anything that has a barcode on it, period. I won't eat anything that's been processed. I just refuse.
Like that.
And the barcode is, it's kind of semi-joking, but actually true. Right, it looks like high fructose corn syrup, like white flour. Stay away from that stuff; it will kill you, in my opinion. and then the other thing is sugar. The amount of sugar intake that a human being has or does on a regular basis in today's society is astonishing. It's just astonishing. And it's everything from, Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Mountain Dew or whatever to fruit juices to high fructose corn syrup to, sugared water, whatever that may be. But, so people are essentially committing slow motion suicide these days. But in doing so, they're breaking the backs of morticians. They really are. Yeah. Because, we see so many people that this obesity epidemic is really, it's sad is what it is. And here's the other deal. It's not like if you think about it rationally, you cannot blame the person themselves. Okay. Because the government has put out these food pyramids where Cheerio is above the boiled egg. Like more healthier than a boiled egg.
Oh, golly, yeah.
No, that's legit.
The politics of the food pyramid is a real thing.
And that is the same politics that you have with the FDA and the fact that you have, again, back to the corporations that are buying politicians, and then the politicians influence the regulators and the bureaucrats. and the beat goes on. And this has caused, in my opinion, more harm than, motor vehicle accidents, homicides, suicides, all of it combined. Right. I was actually thinking of doing a couple podcasts, or not podcasts, but, my YouTube channel thing, just talking about these issues.
Yeah, you should.
Talking about, basically how do you stay out of my morgue? Because I don't need any more work, frankly.
Honestly, there's an absolute market for that, and honestly, a market for what working, living your life, working with death teaches us about life. People want to know it because they ignore it, but for some reason it's safe to listen to me and you talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I understand why they ignore it. The last thing I was going to tell you about the difficulty of being a professional in this business is just exactly that. Okay? It is exactly what you just said. You are faced with your own mortality day in, day out, 24/7. That is so rare in this society. This is a death avoidance society. Most people that have a death and call a funeral home haven't called a funeral home ever. And if they have, it's been 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay. All the while, they have been ignoring their own mortality. Meanwhile, guys like you and me and Caitlin and anybody who's ever worked in this industry have, by obligation, to deal with their own mortality. And it's not an easy thing to deal with. It really isn't. Because like I know, that there is a date certain, an expiration date to me.
Yep.
Right? And at that point, I have to let go of all my worldly belongings. I have to let go of my family, my kids, everybody, right? It's all just, who knows what's on the other side? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I sometimes, just based on what I see on this side, I think it can't be any worse. And I'm talking about like the overall, like the warring and the inhumanity of man and all of the strife and all that stuff, right? It's just a constant turmoil. It makes many people go mad.
Oh yeah.
And but the being able to reckon with your own death. Like I am absolutely, and I'm telling you this honestly. I'm too old to bullshit anybody at this point, and I don't really care to do so. I just say what I'm thinking, and some people like it, some don't, and I'm easy to avoid. I won't try to accost you.
We're not going to chase people, are we?
Right, but I think that if you I have no fear of death. At all. Zero. None. I've seen so much of it and under so many different circumstances. And I really would, I appreciate when people talk to me and we can just sit down and have a cup of coffee or whatever and have a conversation, at least informing about the preventative measures. And they're reasonably easy to do, but first of all, you have to deprogram from all the crap the government's telling you, right? About what's healthy, what isn't, what to eat, don't eat, what to ingest, don't ingest, all those things. The end result is predictable and therefore preventable, but you have to know about it, right? Most people are busy. They're taking the train into work, and then they got to do slog for 8 hours, and then they run back home, and then they got tend to the kids, and then they're dead tired, excuse the pun, and then they go to bed, and they wake up and do it all over again. So the education part of staying out of a morgue, and here's what's even more important than staying out of the morgue, it's staying out of a convalescent hospital. Those places, in my opinion, far and away are horrifying. They're absolutely horrifying. And that is the product of a poor health span. So you may have a very long lifespan, but if a third of that is lived within the confines for whatever reason, be it dementia, be it disability or whatever, right? that you've blown out your knees because you're too heavy, or you lost both legs because you've had uncontrolled diabetes, whatever the reason may be, the institutional housing of the elderly is probably the biggest shame that this country collectively has, and they should be ashamed. They really should be ashamed. The elderly are basically it's like, I don't know, you're maybe too young for this, but the movie Soylent Green.
Oh, no, I've got it.
Yeah, where it's like, but except Soylent Green in a certain way was more merciful, because at least they gave them a nice, like movie and whatever 3D, virtual reality thing, and then they disposed, they killed them, and then they ate them, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's to me. So that's my biggest fear. I have no fear of death whatsoever.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
But a huge fear of being placed, and you know what? And my fear is misplaced, because if they're, the son that has taken over the funeral home and my daughter, neither one of them would ever do that to me. I know that for a fact. And here's what I promise not to do to them. I'm not going to, drag it out, right? So I'm going to remain as healthy as I can, be as productive as I can, because I think that's also part of your like overall well-being, right? Mm-hmm. Being productive. When you slow down and you're sitting in front of the TV watching sports ball and eating Cheetos, the stroke, the heart attack, the disabling event is probably not that far away. Okay. But as long as you're up every morning, you get up early or whatever time you get up, you face the day, have a little laugh in the mirror, don't take yourself too seriously whenever you can. And then go ahead, and at the end of the day, when you lay down, say, well, I got this done and this done and this done and this done, bang, go to sleep. You'll be better as a human being. You'll be better in your own life. You'll be better in your own health for all of that.
I love that. I think that's a great place to end it there. But I want to give you a floor here to plug your channel, and I'm going to give you this opportunity too, because I got you on recording, and these things become really, really special. So if you want to give a shout out to anyone that you want to thank for help in your career, and the second thing is if you want to give any advice to your son in the business, I'll kind of be quiet and give you the floor there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. The people who truly have impacted my life from a business perspective are all gone.
Yeah.
The Ernest Landauers, the Jessica Mitfords, the Richard John Gordon, the Nick Daphnes, the people who actually like extended a true, like, honest hand to me to take a very green individual and, at least help them mature. They're all gone. My thanks is always first and foremost to my family. My family has had to put up with those 2 a.m. phone calls and all of the nonsense that is and just the times, because we all have them, that you're in a bad mood because things aren't the way you'd hope they'd be. You have the 10-year-old in house, right? That's not a good thing. That really difficult. So my family, my son, I want to thank him for giving me all of the perspectives that he has. He's a really kind, gentle individual who's very reserved and thinks things out. Really proud of him. He's doing a great job over there. He has been instrumental in developing certain science or systems that have been helpful, for us. He contributed a lot to, modifications to the website, and injected all kinds of I don't know, millennial or whatever he is, Zoomer type stuff. I'm not even sure what he is, but he's a smart kid who will go places because he's really applied himself. So, and then more recently, guys like David and Phil from White Rose, they're really good cats. A lot of other people I run into, my employees, everybody that is in my sphere that allows me to succeed and push forward and make a go at it every day, because it is a struggle. Every day presents a new challenge, and every day you have to just begin to meet it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Frank, I can't thank you enough. This has been, I loved it from start to finish. You have an amazing story. And, I think, part of what we do as funeral directors is, facilitate and help families share their story. And thank you. Thank you for being here today. Yeah.
You're going to tell your folks who they are? You want to keep it, or who Joe is, or is that I don't know if that's how you're closing, or you're afraid of the wrath of.
Oh no! have we not? Because I keep calling you Joe, I think, and I keep thinking, because have we said your name yet? I don't think I said your business name either.
Well, you just said it once now, and I've been just like, and funny enough, my middle name is Jose. So my name is Francisco Jose Rivero, and I go by Frank. It's just that short. I go by Frank and gone by Frank since the day I landed in this great country. Nice. And I founded Pacific Interment Service almost 40 years ago. And our website is www.interment, INTER, M as in Mary, ENT.com. Not to be confused with internment, which is what they did to the Japanese in World War II. This is interment. And we were, I was lucky that when the internet first started, I was able to grab that URL, because the definition of that is, frankly, any type of disposition of human remains. So it's a pretty good oneword.com that has served us really well. And then the YouTube, which is linked currently to our website, is the Mortuary channel, is what we call it. And anybody that's looking for technical stuff, I'll leave kind of the more, interview and to you guys and Caitlin, storytellers that are good at it. I am, but you know what? The truth of the matter is, if you own a funeral home and you have a problem with one of your machines and you need a hand or somebody to, to kind of spitball with it before you call the guy who's going to charge you $200 an hour plus airfare and hotel and accommodations, you're certainly welcome to give me a call. We have an 800 number on our website, and I'm happy to try to work with you and seeing how, you get your machine running as best as possible. I don't charge. I don't, it's a hobby. It's a fun thing for me. It's not anything that I'm looking to make, career out of.
Wow. But, that's really awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I think, if you talk to some of the local operators, they would confirm that I've been helpful, if nothing else, in trying to get their machine at least back up and running, because a lot of people only have one, and it's nothing more stressful than that morgue starts backing up. And the last thing I want to say is that we have all of our permits except for the state right now, which is the easy one. So city of Emeryville, because we're located in San Francisco, but the crematory and mortuary that does all the operational stuff is in Emeryville. City of Emeryville has given us permits. The East Bay MUD, which is the water municipal district in the East Bay, Oakland, Emeryville, Berkeley, that area. We also have permits from them, and the health department, state health department, has issued them, and our local one also. So we're going to be sending up our requests for the state licensing here, probably maybe even next week, and also ordering one or the other. So stay tuned, because that'll be the fourth video in the 4-video series on what the final decision is after much consideration.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for telling your story, and I'm going to let you be. So have a good evening, all right?
All right, partner. You take care of yourself. If you need anything, I'm here. Give me a ring, okay?
I appreciate you, pal. Take care. Have a good night.
You too.
All right.
Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Been fun.